Marcus Freeman, the new head coach for the Fighting Irish. They just named their new starting quarterback, Tyler Buchner. Jack Cohn is no mas, and Tyler Buchner is now going to be your guy going forward. And so we're going to talk about the over-under win total for Notre Dame. As it sits right now, it's at 8.5 wins, which is a really solid number, especially for your first-year head coach. And Irish fans, I think, would be very much upset if they were somehow too much below that mark, which I don't blame you. I mean, we're talking about Notre Dame here, a program that's been to the playoff multiple times and has a story tradition. Like, you should be able to be around this number. So I think the number is respectable. We're going to talk about what is essentially making up this program, both their strengths and our question marks for them. And then ultimately, I'm going to tell you how I think they fare in relation to this 8.5 number at the end of this segment. So to start this whole thing off, the strengths of Notre Dame are pretty true to what they've had in the past. They are just going to be tough on both sides of the ball in terms of the trenches. 4 of the 5 offensive linemen coming back. You got Chris Tyree running the ball. He's a little bit more of an unproven commodity, but I think he should be able to tote the rock pretty well behind those big boys. And then on the defensive side of the ball, like I mentioned, Isaiah Foskey, one of your leaders on that defensive line, he said, hey, I'm coming back. Let's do this again. They're going to be solid on both sides of the ball up front. And that just as your calling card. I mean, I've said this before. Football is won in the trenches. If you win the line of scrimmage, you have a really good chance to win the football game. So for Notre Dame to be strong at the point of attack is going to be crucial moving forward. Because think of everything that stems off of that. If you win at the trenches offensively, you can run the ball. If you win the trenches defensively, you can put pressure on the quarterback and stop the run. So that's going to be their calling card. That's going to be what they're made of. And then in addition to that, they added Brandon Joseph from the transfer portal, a safety from Northwestern who is an All-American caliber player. Then you got Michael Mayer, All-American tight end. He's going to be the guy that you feed early and often. He is a Roback guy as well. I believe he has a Roback NIL deal. All that's to say, they're going to be really tough, both in the trenches and then some of their key skill players just have that tough brand about them. Michael Mayer, not easy to bring down. He's your tight end. Brandon Joseph, going to lay the wood at safety. So some things to be excited about there. Toughness will be the calling card when it comes to Notre Dame. Now, I say weaknesses. I think even more so it's question marks. My question mark for Notre Dame is falling towards the back end of the secondary, outside of Brandon Joseph, more so at the corner position, and then also at the receiver position. Because we saw at times during the Brian Kelly regime, Notre Dame was just outmatched athletically on the outside. And you have a very limited potential of wins if you can't win the one-on-one matchups when it comes to that wide receiver corner spot. And so I think that Marcus Freeman being a defensive guy will make that a point of emphasis. I don't think it's going to be something that they just let continue to nag them as they go on throughout his tenure at Notre Dame, but it's got to be something you address. Because it's great to win the trenches, but if you just get quick game to death, if you just get jump balled to death on defense, it's tough to win. It just is. It's tough to go from there when you're just getting 50-50 to death. Ask Alabama. It's not a knock on Alabama, but if you watch that championship game against Georgia, Stetson Bennett was just throwing jump ball after jump ball. Now, I'm not trying to compare Notre Dame and Alabama. What I am trying to say is that you need to have an answer in the secondary with the one-on-ones. In addition to that, going vertically with your quarterback, we don't know a lot about Tyler Buchner yet. I believe he was somewhere around a 1-in-1 ratio when it came to touchdowns to interceptions and very limited action. But still, if you can't stretch the ball vertically, they're just going to stack the box. If you're a one-dimensional football team, they will stack the box against you. And even if you have a great offensive line, it's tough to win games if you're not multidimensional. And so my thesis on Notre Dame comes down to this. Notre Dame is like a boxer. They're just going to throw right hook after right hook and beat you to death. They're going to throw right hooks until they knock you out. Now, where they could run into trouble is where they get into some sort of fight with someone who's great in jiu-jitsu, right? Or an MMA fighter. If you land a couple punches early and can knock them out before this thing gets going, great. You control the tempo. You're converting on 3rd and 2. You're having long drives. That's awesome. Knockout for Notre Dame. However, if you're not able to land those punches and you're outside of your skill set, you're out of your game, and they start hurting you in the passing game. They start out-athleting you on the outside, and they get you out of the game where you can't throw right hooks. You're down on the ground now wrestling with this dude. Now you're at a disadvantage. Now you can't play your game. So for Notre Dame, can they add a counter to what they already do well? Can they do something else well besides just throw that right hook? I believe they can, but it's something they have to do in order to get to where I think they ultimately want to be for Notre Dame in 2022. So talking about this 8.5 win total, folks, I would be surprised if they don't push past that. I think 9 is a much more realistic win total number for them. The 3 games that I'm concerned about, I'm not picking them to lose, but the 3 games that I'm eyeing as areas of concern are at Ohio State, Clemson, and at USC. Question marks surrounding USC and Clemson, not so much Ohio State, but question marks around both those programs because we don't know what they're going to be at that point in the year. We talked about on this show already, we don't know what Clemson's going to have at quarterback at that point in the year, but all that's to say, if you lose 3 games and you finish 9-3 in your first year under Marcus Freeman, it's a really good start. That is a really good spot to be in year 1 under a new head coach. That's phenomenal. So I think 9 wins is probably what I put them at, but either way, I'm taking the over for 8.5 for Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame is going to be a program to watch. I think they take a small step back, but that's to be expected when you have a new quarterback and a new head coach. Marcus Freeman has been recruiting. There's a lot of talk about what Brian Kelly couldn't do there, and Marcus Freeman just said, okay, watch this. I'll make Notre Dame cool again. Bam. So I'm not here to stir up beef between Brian Kelly and Marcus Freeman, but I'm just saying the future is bright in South Bend. This year, I'm buying over 8.5 wins. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.